Welcome to the Security Cocktail Hour. I'm Joe Patty.
Adam Roth.
Adam Roth, with the background, you're shaming me with that thing. You're showing much more spirit than I have in the show.
Well, you
Starting
want
to feel
full
bad.
transparency?
I don't want to know what's behind it. Actually, I know what's behind it.
You know what's behind it. It's hanging from my ceiling in my bedroom. I mean, Joe, we
now
got
you
to
don't
get
have, now you don't have to make the bed anymore when we record. Is that why
we
you got
have to
that?
get at least 500 more viewers in order for us to get a studio.
Yeah, at least easily.
Either that or we're going to Nikki's house to use it. I'm not driving all the way down there, but still.
You can use the screen. You can borrow the screen.
Oh, that's right. You've got a screen too. Oh boy. Okay, so we obviously have a very high-end guest here. We have Dr. Nikki Robinson. Nikki, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be hanging out with you both.
Well, thanks. And I am, I guess, very honored that you even have a screen. So good. Excellent.
Yes, it came with the many years of podcasting, so I retained the background.
Cool. Well, you're a smart person. You've got not one but 2 doctoral degrees, and you've written books and had patents and all. But before we get into that, we got to start with the drink on this one, because this drink is a little, I guess it's not complicated, but it's got a little technique to it. Huh?
There's a
The
little
way you
technique.
make it.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we did the prep call for the show, we always say to the guest, okay, it's guest choice. What do you want to drink? What do we have? And Nikki, with like no hesitation whatsoever, says tequila sunrise. I'm like, okay, what's that? So
It's one of my favorites. That's if I don't drink a lot of cocktails, but if I do, it's going to be a tequila sunrise for sure.
all right. Okay, so let's mix it up here. So you start with tequila, right?
Yes. You add a little
All
bit
right,
of
Adam,
tequila.
let's do
That's
this.
up to dealer's choice, how much you'd like to add.
Well, I got to work on my chapter 1 for my doctorate. So should I add like
So
4
maybe
ounces?
maybe a little bit.
All right, I got nothing to do. It's the weekend, so okay.
There you go.
All right, so you got tequila, and then it's
A little bit of orange juice.
orange juice. Okay.
A little bit of orange juice. And then I'm going to help you guys hopefully try not to make the same mistake I did when we get to the next step.
So I guess I should show people what we're doing.
I
Okay,
think
so there's the
eventually what
orange
we're going to have
juice.
to do, Joe, is we're going to have
What's
to
that?
collect the drinks on all our episodes and have a podcast edition on how to make each of those drinks.
Hey, that's content. We got to do clips. There we go. Oh, we can do a whole clip show, like a bad TV show or something. Do all
There you
clips.
go.
Okay, so then it's
And then it's grenadine. And so
Okay.
if you try to drip it down the inside, and you'll see I made the mistake, I didn't do that, but try to drip it down on the inside so that it pools at the bottom and you get a nice gradient. I did
got
mine
it.
backwards. There you go. He's got it.
Okay, that's a lot of pressure. I got to make sure I don't get this on my keyboard. Actually,
I have a doctorate in tequila sunrise.
Is it doing it?
Let's see it, Joe.
Is that? Okay, I'm cheating. I'm turning it around. Is that the idea?
Yeah, and you can
Oh, do I
add a
need
little more
more?
if you like. It's up to you. Yeah, however you like it. But yeah,
I have no idea
Adam's
what-
got it. This is what not to do. Was what I did. So,
Okay, you know
there
what?
you go.
I'm not going to push my luck. That says there. I'll turn that
That's
there.
perfect.
Now
That's
it's
perfect.
really good. All right.
Cheers.
Nicely done.
That's right.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Yes.
Nikki, you have a 3rd doctorate now in mixology too. Congratulations.
Well, the parent company to Security Cocktail Hour is what, Joe?
Purity mixologist.
I should get a certification in that. I'll have to work on that next.
You want us to make you a
There you
certificate?
go.
If you could, please. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
I'll hang it on the wall.
we can issue a doctorate. I don't know if it's going to be recognized very far, but
Well, maybe we can. Was it the petition the Middle College Association?
Middle
That's the one.
States Association
Yeah.
of something or other. I don't know.
But you're gonna have to write 5 chapters, Nikki.
That's all right. I feel like once you've done it a couple of times, you're like, okay, I can make it happen. The first one's the hardest. The second one is a little bit easier.
You mean the first assassination, like James Bond, or do you mean like the first book?
The first
No, the first doctorate.
the
Joe.
first doctorate.
There is one person.
Come on,
I think
it's James Bond.
I think there's one person at our school
Yeah.
that just got their 6th doctorate.
6th doctorate.
Yeah.
And
So
he lives in New York.
Does this person ever actually practice his or her trade, or do they
This
just get
person
doctorates
is
all day?
really active in the industry. I mean, like super active. I didn't meet him for the school. I don't know. I shouldn't say the school, but I met him online. I'm like, you go to my school. You have 5 doctorates. He goes, I just finished my 6th. He might even see this for all I know. I think he's part of the podcast list.
Yeah, I switched from doctorate degrees. I felt like 2 was good, and then I started writing books. I was like, I'll switch into the different area of writing.
Yeah, advanced degrees, been there, done that. I can see you're done. So
I think if you get 7 doctorates, you get to be honorary president. No, I'm kidding.
yeah, really. Okay, well, you guys will forever be ahead of me in the race for doctoral degrees because I'm going to keep putting up I plan to keep up my goose egg right there. But in the meantime, so Nikki, actually, your 2 degrees are into very interesting things that I think not enough people talk about. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your field?
Yes, I would be happy to. So my first degree is a DSc in cybersecurity, and I actually started pursuing that when I was still in IT operations. So I was on the IT side, but I was managing pretty large systems, and so I got really heavy into vulnerability management because I owned the risk of my system, and I thought, well, that seems scary that somebody is allowing me to own this risk. What do I need to do?
That was your first mistake.
Yes.
To own the risk. You always got to give it to someone else. So.
Yes, that was a lesson learned right there. But yeah, so I discovered vulnerability chaining at the time, and I was really interested in understanding how people scored vulnerabilities. How do they understand and score vulnerabilities? So that led me to the DSc. And while I was pursuing the DSc, the PhD in human factors was released at Capital Technology University, and I was really intrigued, and I started looking into human factors engineering, the discipline, and what I was lacking in my DSc was the understanding of how people or why people scored the vulnerabilities the way that they did. I was so intrigued by how they scored them. They scored them essentially way higher than I would have ever anticipated that they did. They scored everything 9 and above. And I was like, whoa, wait, what happened? And I didn't have that qualitative understanding of what happened. So I went for the PhD in human factors. I pushed my research a little further to understanding cognition and how we as people understand vulnerabilities based on our own experiences, our own skill sets, and kind of education in the environment. And so I kind of took that further into human factors, and I found that it takes me. It's a very complementary to the technical controls and implementations that we do as practitioners, but it helps me understand my users a lot better and even the security practitioners I work with.
Right. Now, the human factors that you're doing, we should probably explain a little bit. It's especially for IT people. It's not like user interface design or usability. You're talking about the psychology of things, and there's a real engineering discipline to how people interact with stuff, right?
Yes, for sure. It was one of the things that drew me to human factors initially because it's used very heavily in the aerospace industry. So it's used a lot in aviation, how pilots are able to, fly planes, but how do we understand them as individuals, as human beings, when human error is a factor or when they're, tired and they've got fatigue, all of these things. So it's taking in all of the psychological aspects and human behavior components of us as people, but also building a much more, I would say, a better framework for engineering for what we do in cybersecurity. Even years ago, when I was hearing the term security engineering, I thought, is that really engineering, or are we talking about development, right? So, I got really interested in that.
Yeah, like computer science isn't really a science. Anything with science in it is not science. Same thing with engineers,
I don't know, but let me ask you this, Nikki, since I'm like chasing that doctorate. From the human factors side, from the PhD side, that would be more of like, I guess, and I know we should probably not be diving deeper into it, but that would be more of the quantitative study, right? Because you had to actually interview people in order to figure that out, right?
Yeah, qualitative. So I did more interviews, but I also did a focus group because I wanted to see one of the benefits of doing a focus group and talking to IT and security professionals at the same time is that I was able to kind of get them all into a room together and open a dialogue, right? Because I wanted to see, do they agree? Do they disagree? What are their different perspectives? And without doing that, I didn't, I would have never had the insight into why they felt the way that they felt or based on their experiences. So,
Any, yeah,
yeah.
any biases that you think of, or like did someone?
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Like as an IT, as a guy that was in IT, but then I went to cybersecurity. Though everybody lumps cybersecurity into IT, people automatically have these biases about, oh, vulnerability should always be here or there or that or this or that.
Yeah, the study of different biases in human factors, but also just as a cognitive function, understanding how people from unconscious bias to imperative bias. There's like a number of different forms of bias that we can experience, but it's interesting to see how it's really based in people's experiences, right? So from the IT perspective, and I can say this as someone who was an IT practitioner, my job is to make sure the systems are functioning. If they're not functioning, if people can't get access or systems are down, I'm getting yelled at. So I don't want to be yelled at. That's my number one directive
Yeah.
in life. I
Well,
don't want to get yelled at. So they have people build this inherent bias of, oh my gosh, if I do this thing, I'm going to get yelled at, or I really have to do this because this is how it functions. And I think one of the biases I see most often is that security negatively impacts functionality or operations, and I don't see that as always true. So, but that's definitely an interesting piece of it.
That's interesting, right? So what we're saying. Let me step back a moment. Just so you know, full transparency, Joe was my boss at one point in my life, and Joe did yell at me, and I feared not doing the right thing. So I had that conscious bias of dealing with Joe. But that being said, um, yeah, right. There's always that impression, especially when I worked for Joe. We had, for lack of a better term, 100 CEOs or more, 200 CEOs. Everybody was a CEO in that company. You could figure out what type of firm it was. And
it was a
their
law firm. You
problem,
can say it was a law firm. It's
okay,
okay.
it's a law firm. And I try to be careful. And the thing is, wait, do you realize when you put that security function in place, it's prohibiting me to do my job? And we would be like, your customer wanted us to put that in place, and we did put it in place as it should be. And whether it's data loss prevention, whether it was getting access to a records room online where they shared records between each other, or whether it was I gotta download data to a USB for a tribunal,
Mm.
those are the things that we had to deal with constantly and fight that social bias. Like, no, you should be making it easier for me. And we get it. We want to make it easy for you, but you have to find that fine line where the security practice is in place, but the user is able to do what they need to do as well.
Yeah, usability versus security. I find that people see them as, kind of combative or, on differing sides versus security can enable development. It can enable, IT and technology, but it has to be done in the right way, right? So forcing someone to rotate their passwords every 30 days, it's probably not going to make them very happy with me, right? If I force them to do that. Maybe I can come up with a better way, an alternative, so that they don't have to rotate their passwords as much, but I'm still implementing security, MFA or some other, mechanism that I can make sure that they're protected in a different way.
I think that in the past, a lot of people have been, confronted with, security systems that are really cumbersome, really hard to use, and also often not very effective, which doesn't do much help. But things have really changed a lot, and I think we've gotten to the point where a good security system is actually easier to use than a less secure one. Like biometrics when they're supposed to work and be easier to use and make it easier for you. I remember I've been through this so many times. People, when Face ID came out on phones, they're like, "Oh, another new security thing. I don't want to use this. Whatever. This is too cumbersome." And I'd say, "Well, what you have to do is look at the phone." But yeah, I'd say, "How are you going to use the thing without looking at it?" You know, this is designed to be so seamless. It can't get any easier.
Wait, but then throw a pandemic into it. and then you have a facial mask, and people are asking, why can't it identify me through the facial mask?
Yeah, it is. It's a delicate balance. It really is. It's this delicate balance of helping and enabling our users, but also making sure that they're protected, right? So that if something goes wrong, that I don't know, that we're more enabling them. We're not necessarily taking things away. I feel like that was really the, I don't know, really the impetus for me doing the work. Is I was like, I don't want to take things away from users. I just want to help them I want to make security easier for them. And human
Yeah.
factors is a good vehicle for that.
So we had a user that got mad at me, and I implemented a DLP for email, and basically you were really only allowed to send to business email addresses. And obviously there's a fine line between what's business, what's not. Some organizations do use Gmail. That's who they are. They don't have personalized domains. But this one individual said, "Look, I've been forwarding my emails from my corporate email to my personal email. Why is it still blocking? After a while, it should learn that this is my norm. Well, it's not working correctly." I'm like, uh, it's working correctly because you should not be forwarding
That's
your
right.
corporate, you know, proprietary information to your personal email. It should never go there, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, that sounds like a case that's interesting. I mean, does this count as human factors when it's something like, okay, something like that is a policy decision? It's like the company has said you should not be doing this, um, and people just disagree with it or don't understand it because it seems like people don't want to follow stuff that they either don't agree with or don't understand. I mean, do you have to pick apart a lot of that stuff in what you
Yeah,
do?
this is very funny that we're talking about this very specifically because we were talking about writing. I was literally writing about this morning. This aspect is so interesting because it's kind of where, we talk about people, process, technology, but this is where people and process have to align really well when the technology is implemented. Because I've read security policies in the past that are 600 pages. That to me is wild. How is someone supposed to be able to understand, digest, and then act upon a 600-page document? And that's just for a security policy, right? That's not even all the other procedures and things that they have to take in. So yes, I think process alignment with user functionality and understanding is super critical because if we have inherently complex processes or procedures, I think that's sort of in one bucket. The other is sort of what you're describing, where our policy is in place to protect our users, and it's more about either they don't understand or it feels like if to them it feels like it's impeding their functionality. So to that user, I would say, why do you have to send it to your personal Gmail? Is it because it's too complicated to log into your organizational email, right? Is it you have too many tokens? You have to reset your password how many times? Do you have to log in from a specific browser? Are you limited, in what you can do in the client? Do you not have access to like Adobe Professional or something that you need to be able to do your work? So you're trying to do it from your personal laptop because that's where you have your resources. So I think that's part of understanding what that user's use case is and why they feel like it's easier to operate from their personal email account versus their corporate account.
and that goes to a perfect place, right? Because you can work in one organization and you can be divided, and they'll be like, listen, I only want to have one device. I want to be able to have my corporate email and everything on here, and I only want to carry around one phone. And then you get another person who says, I don't want one phone. I want to be able to divide my corporate from my personal life. When I'm home, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want another laptop to carry from my office. And my company's only giving me either a laptop or a desktop. So if I'm going to have a laptop and I need it when I travel for business, I'm not going to bring it home. So I'm going to forward my stuff to my, and you can get all these documented excuses, but at the end of the day, you're not going to make everybody happy.
No, but I do think, no, for sure, you're never going to make everybody happy. But I do think it's interesting to survey and understand your population for what their biggest, even if it's perceived impediment to their job is, right? Even if it's just a perception, and you can say, oh, well, actually, you can access through O365 online, and here's how you log in, right? So sometimes it's perceived, sometimes it's actual or
You're right.
factual. So Anyway, but this is where digging into where the actual problem statement is, I think is super important, and why I was really glad I did the DSc, because I learned how to craft a really good problem statement, and that also helped me to probably annoy my users a little bit, but also ask them a lot of really good questions to try to help figure out what kind of solution was actually going to work for them, or if it was perceived or factual.
Okay, so how do you work through a case like that? Because sometimes you have things where you say it's perception. It's like, okay, there may be some perception, maybe they don't know, but then I know that at least anecdotally, a lot of times in my career, people say, I need this thing we don't have to do my job. And like you say, you're like, well, yeah, but you want to use this, you want to use your Apple word processor, whatever, Pages, whatever they call it, but we're giving you Office at work. And it's like, is that really productivity? Or is that personal preference? Is it level of comfort, fear, just not wanting to do something new? I mean, how do you sort through all that and do it in a way that, without the draconian thing, that I've always had to say is like, well, the company bought this, they're telling you to use this, and what do you want from me?
Yeah, I think it is. I start with, which I feel like there's been such a big there's been a big push in the industry talking about empathy and emotional intelligence. Even in the last 3, 4, 5 years, we've seen, kind of bringing emotional intelligence into what we do as cybersecurity professionals. I think some of it is starting with that. I think some of it is seeing, okay, is it that they're uncomfortable with the technology? If it's that, but this is what the company is paying for, maybe I can provide them some free online training or something to help them understand how to use the product, or how maybe they can transfer their skills from a different product to this one. Or maybe it's helping them see that whatever, I'll give a good example, different browsers. I had a case where someone was like, well, this web page looks different from this browser to this browser. It shouldn't. It should be the same across both. I should be able to see the same functionality, the same radio buttons, right, that I'm expecting to be able to fill out this form. Why is it different between browsers? And I said, well, that's actually an inherent functionality of the browser itself, right? They have chosen, based on their interface, how to consume and visualize your content, or the website's content. So sometimes websites will use radio buttons, or that's the only way that they'll use it, and some use like a list or a drop down or something. I will say that was years ago. Websites have gotten a lot better to be consumed between different browsers and mobile devices, but I think people still have that same inherent thing. Why doesn't it look the same? And it's like, well, different companies built and maintain these browsers, they're going to be a little different, right? It's not the same developers that did the same thing.
So you were just discussing how a web page might look different on a browser on a mobile device than it would look on a desktop. Let's take that a step further. There are people out there who think the app on the mobile device should look exactly like the web page on the machine on the desktop. And what they don't realize is that sometimes apps are either more enhanced in the app, as an app, or less enhanced and with more functionality in the browser. And sometimes organizations gear you towards an app or the web page for certain reasons as well. And that becomes an issue because you might not be the creator of that app or that web page. You're a consumer, that's your vendor, and they expect you, go fix that right now.
Yes, I feel like, especially in my IT operations life, but certainly in cybersecurity as well, that it's like, hey, why can't you fix this thing? And it's like, well, I can explain to you how the technology works, and I can do my best to help you work around it. But in some ways, it's, I think, helping people understand the technology or why it's different. Sometimes you're not going to win. I've lost many a battle. I'm sure I will lose more. But I take the time to at least explain it and provide resources to help people understand, knowing that, I can at least try. And then, if they don't understand for some reason, or they're still unhappy, then, maybe I can try to figure out something else for them, some alternative. But,
Yeah.
sometimes it is what it is.
So let's take a detour for a second, right? We're talking about social behaviors, and that's an issue, right? We spoke about vulnerability, but let's talk about like compromise, if that's okay for a moment. You know, um, Maybe you don't focus on that, but we all in cyber have had that issue where we've tried to educate those people that are users and consumers, and some of them more than others, and they don't necessarily understand basic health and hygiene. And it's hard for us to put ourselves in their place because, like, it's inherent in us. And even we make mistakes sometimes too, right? But they might not understand. When I say they, I mean like regular users, the people that normally don't really interface with technology, but they have to because it's part of their role. Whereas technology is our role. So that's got to be a little bit interesting, right, Nikki?
Yes. I actually, so to back up a little bit in my education, the roundabout circle that I took, I started in psychology before I went into IT
Ooh,
and software engineering. So
Did.
I was a
Okay,
psych
now it's
undergrad.
coming
I
together.
know. And then I went like full circle back into human factors. So, but I was interested at the time in abnormal psychology. So understanding, different types of things. I was particularly interested in schizophrenia and trying to come up with some kind of solution for that.
So you went from abnormal security or abnormal psychology to
Yes.
cybersecurity. That's
Freudian
not so
slip.
odd.
Freudian
That's a
slip,
perfect
right,
step.
Joe?
Yeah.
Is that a
Yes.
Freudian slip?
Yeah.
Yes, it was funny how I kind of made the roundabout, but I think kind of taking that arc in my career, seeing that technology plays a big part in what we do. Of course it does, right? That we are consumers of lots of different types of technology. And what I find with understanding the technology is really one piece. The other piece is really understanding the people that I'm working with. So compromise to me comes in a lot of different ways. I've worked with a lot of developers, product owners, system owners, HR people, administration people, that, you know, understanding them as an individual and saying that, there isn't always a one size fits all solution to what's happening, right? Like every person has their own experience with technology. Some people may be really frustrated with password management because it's become far too cumbersome for them. Or maybe somebody doesn't like the MFA challenges because they've been targeted for MFA type attacks, right? SMS based MFA attacks, and they are just completely fed up with it. They think that it's ineffective, whether it's because of the MFA technology or because of the person that was targeting them with those types of attacks. So I think helping to understand why that person feels that way at least gives a little bit of validation to saying, hey, I understand your frustration. I get it. Maybe we have this law or regulation that tells us we must act in this way because of, self-attestation or NIST, requirements. Maybe we're in a federal environment. We have to follow certain protocols. But to me, there's always a way to find a way to help people. I'll give an example. I've worked with a lot of developers who are just like, I can't implement secure code. I can't do it. It's too difficult. I can't update my Java libraries. I can't do this because of X, Y, and Z. And what I find is when I speak with them it could be a combination of things, but usually it's because it's like every time I patch something, it breaks my application. I have to then go debug and figure out what happened. And it could be an application that's been maintained for 7 years, something that they inherited that they did not build, and they can't figure out why it's broken or why it breaks. And they don't have the resources or the funding to build a new application or start from scratch. So they're kind of, reliant on making this thing work as long as they can. That source of frustration leads to insecurity because of this old package. Maybe it's end of life software, maybe it's, EOS. But me helping them understand why the package is failing, because I'm a developer. If I can come in and say, okay, show me where this is failing, let's actually debug this, that changes the tone of the conversation versus me throwing over the wall, hey, you've got to do this thing, you have this vulnerability, why haven't you fixed it yet? That's a very combative start to a conversation versus, hey, I'd like to understand why this is breaking. Can you help walk me through like what you're actually seeing in the code so we can figure out how to update this package without breaking your application?
Yeah, what I find difficult in a lot of those situations is, we're talking about an exercise in problem solving here that especially developers are supposed to do. That's a lot of the job. And, you know, IT people very often can be incredibly tenacious and creative when the problem is interesting to them. But when it's not, and when they're really not that interested in it, they don't tend to do like, the person who said, I can't figure out how to secure this, I bet they figure out how to do things they don't think they can do all the time, but for some
benefits
reason
to
there
me.
is that barrier with security. They're like, it's too hard. It doesn't make sense. I don't see the value in it. That's in my career, that's been really tough to break through.
I
Well,
would
yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say I would argue too, working in the vulnerability management space a lot, because I hear, it's like, well, they don't understand these vulnerabilities and this risk and this and that. And sometimes I question, but do they have to? Have we made it so complicated to understand what these vulnerabilities do, why they're exploitable, how they interact with the environment? Because most of the time people don't care, right? They're just like, oh, I have another patch to implement. And they're so over patching stuff that they're just like, oh, they've made this so difficult for me.
And that kind of goes back to what I was going to say, right? We talk about separation of duties sometimes. Sometimes it's just important enough to know how to implement something because somebody else understood why you have to implement something. You don't always have to know why, though it helps, but you don't always have to know why. But that also goes back to something like, what if you have a developer, but you have a security person, but then you start doing secure DevOps, and those roles start to blend, and you're not focused on one over the other, but sometimes you might be biased. Like, look, I got to get this code out. I don't think it's going to be an issue if we do this, this, and this from a security standpoint. Whereas, as security people, people look at us like we're wearing Superman capes, and we're fighting every single battle that we have to do. But we understand why. We understand when compromises happen, it happens because of certain things that constantly happen over and over again. And what I mean by that is, oh, you don't want us to do two-factor authentication, or you want us to make this application available to the whole internet, or, open up this port to everything? No. We want to know those IP addresses. And if possible, we want to have somebody VPN in instead of opening it up to even a destination or source IP. So, yes, not everybody knows what we know. And it's almost like a few good men. You need us on that wall. You want us on that wall, you know? So,
Yeah, yeah. I think it is. Sometimes it's. I've mentioned perception a little bit, but I think sometimes it's also perception of the security team, right? Are they helping me, or are they just telling me to do a thing that feels arbitrary to me and I don't understand why, right? So are they helping me to get to that end state, or are they just saying, do the thing? Why didn't you do the thing?
Well, sometimes we are, but I also find it frustrating because we say, we like to say, well, security is everyone's job. Well, yes, but realistically, a lot of the discussions that I've had over the years with people, especially in more recent years, it's like, okay, you're a system administrator, whatever. You're running the Windows machines. Okay, patches have been coming out for them once a month for the past, I don't know, 15 years, 20, however long it's been going on. It's like, I want to say, dude, that's part of the job. you, you got to know this stuff. You're developing things that are internet facing. You're writing web apps or something. It's like, this is part of what you do. You can't be an engineer like Ford or GM or something, or a designer, and say, you know what? I don't have to deal with those bumpers or those airbags or anything. I'm gonna, of course you do, and it is restrictive, but
Yeah.
that's just the way things work. At least that's the way I've always seen it, and it's not a very popular stance among some people, I will admit.
I feel like, if we go back to basics, like a system administrator should have a basic understanding of security in administration, and a network engineer should have a certain amount of understanding implementing ACLs and why it's important and what ports are more vulnerable than others. We as cybersecurity people, whether we're in incident response or whether we're in reversing malware or endpoint detection or whatever it is, we know more. But it's like being a doctor, right? If you're an eye doctor, you should know what issues are happening around eyes. But if you're a general practitioner, you're not going to start diagnosing eye issues. You're going to send it to a specialist. And that's how cybersecurity has become. We've become general practitioners for certain things and specialists for others. And depending on the size of the organization, it gets to be very siloed. We're in a very different world we were in cybersecurity than we were 10 years ago, and we're in a different. And in 2 years from now, who knows what's going to happen? Like, oh, get the AI security engineer in here for agentic AI. We need them in here right away. I mean, oh, we have one now.
Yeah, I do think I agree. We as security professionals, I think, have to have a very deep pool of knowledge that we can pull from, both from a technology stack perspective and from a threats, attackers, vulnerabilities and exploits perspective. I do think it's one of the reasons I'm very happy that I did get a background in IT operations, because I think it gave me that full technology stack understanding. So when I went into security, it was like, oh yeah, that's why we do all of those things, because all this bad stuff could really happen if we don't. But yeah, I agree. When I was on the IT side, I was responsible for patching and automation. But you know what I find when I talk to, just in general, IT practitioners or developers, they don't always, they do plenty of times, but they don't always leverage automation in the way that they could. I think sometimes we get scared of automation in operations because we're afraid that if we automate too many tasks or patching, things like that, that it's going to impact our functionality or our operations environments. But I've done it very successfully in multiple environments. You can do it. And so I think I've spent quite a bit of time helping people to understand automation and scripting and how powerful that can be to alleviate a lot of the manual tasks that you end up doing over and over again. Like just something super simple like automating the patching of your dev environment. If you're patching it every week on Sunday night or Monday morning or whatever, that expectation is there, right? It's like, hey, every Monday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. we're patching the dev environment. It will be unavailable. That's it. Set expectations, right? So I don't know. I think something simple like that can be really impactful.
Okay, but here's a psychological question.
I was just gonna
Yes.
say,
Oh, hit me with it.
Yes, there we go. I've dealt with. I feel like I should have a PhD in vulnerability management. I've done so much of it at this point. But when it comes to things like patching and automation and doing stuff like that, yes, it can make your life much easier. It makes the processes more efficient. I remember in the old days, you'd be like, oh yeah, that guy who's the Unix sysadmin who's got nothing but a bunch of shell scripts and he sits there and reads the paper all day. He's a god. But more often than that, what I've seen are people don't want to do the automation, and you kind of refer to it mostly out of fear. They're just afraid that it's going to break and they're going to get in trouble, or there's something they didn't catch.
but there's
And
another
that's it,
step, Joe. There's another step. Like, let's take it even a step before that. I don't want automation. I'm going to lose my job.
Well,
I
there's that
don't
too.
understand automation. I'm afraid of automation. If they start automating, the SOC analyst level 1, and we're looking up now malware, which was my job to write a report and see if this malware is bad, and now we're using, I don't know, like whatever automation tools that we're using today, then what am I going to do?
I would say upskilling is even more important now than it ever has been. Because I think if, to the first point about automation, I think if you're not leveraging automation, you're potentially really limiting yourself skill wise as far as like what's possible, right? Because I've walked into environments, taken a look around and kind of seen what's going on, right? I within 6 months can automate or fix things. There was one job I had in particular. Within 6 months, I had fixed the entire vulnerability management program. We went from 60 to 70% like patching rates every month to 99% every month. That didn't limit my job, but what it did was they saw me fix things and then they were like, "Ooh, can you fix this other thing? Ooh, can you fix this other thing? Hey, you fixed this one thing. Can you also do this and that?" So I understand the inherent fear behind that, but I also think being a problem solver and an implementer can be really powerful. You're right. I understand there's some fear based there, but I think if you can show yourself as a problem solver and a fixer, that opens yourself up skill wise to continue to learn more and do more in the environment.
You ever see Spies Like Us? And Dan Aykroyd's downstairs and he's in the basement of like whatever Department of Defense, and he goes, where are those reports? He goes, I think he said something like, I automated that. I got that done a week ago. Well, do something else. I already did that. Well, do something else. I already did that. Clean this place up. It's a mess, you know. But the thing is, people get mad. Like, if you're more efficient and still doing, if you're able to do all your work but finish it sooner, there are bosses like, then what are you doing then? I'm not
Yeah.
There
saying I'm
is,
not saying that's the wrong, that's the right answer, but I'm saying there's unfortunately people out there with that mentality.
yeah, but look, the way things work in security and even in IT in general, there is so much work to do. There are so many things that could get done. I mean, we have the whole concept of risk management, and a lot of it is based on us not being able to do as much stuff as we think we need to do. So yeah, I don't think there's any shortage of work for people, put it that way. Even
Automation,
if you automate
yeah.
everything to death.
Automation allows for scalability. If you are doing the same task every single day and there's a way to automate it, then you're doing your organization a disservice by not finding a way to do it. I'm not saying those tools are always available, but there are people out there who can write things for free with certain things, whether it's Python, whether it's doing things with Windows. I mean, and you can automate certain tasks. Of course, it's nice to have automation software to work with your SIM and everything else. That's really the way to go, or XDR or whatever we want to use. But XDR being that the superset of managed detection and response. Looking up malware, whatever else we're doing. It's a way to go. I mean, you don't have to hire another seat, a person in a seat, and they can still do their work, and that allows that person actually to grow higher if they
Yeah,
can
that's what I'm
automate the
saying. You
support.
build them. Yeah, you just constantly build that skill level. I find, when I started in IT, I was on help desk. I would say help desk is primarily a function of the past, right? That's not a thing that you see a lot anymore. You see a lot of automation around IT support, password resets, things like that I used to do when I was on help desk 17 years ago, right? So, I don't think that I would be on help desk today, right? I think is kind of what I'm saying. So I think it's good to be able to build your skills over time. And, a lot of the automation that I learned even as a sysadmin, senior sysadmin, as I was kind of making my way into security, a lot of those skills I still use today, helping enable IT and developers. Because if they don't have those skills, I'm like, hey, here's how you do this. I already wrote this Windows script for you. It's PowerShell. Just take it, use it, right? And I find that also is really helpful. I'm going to take it back to the security angle. It also helps me if I need to find someone, if something is going wrong, if I need to get in communication with someone and they already know who I am because I help provide them a script, I can reach out to them and be like, hey, I've got this thing. I kind of need this information. They're like, oh, yeah, sure. What's up? Let me help you out. So it's nice to introduce yourself to people or help people out before something goes wrong.
Yeah, well, that's one of the, basic tenets, I think, of security, especially in security management. So one of the things that's most difficult about starting a new job in security is, people are always very wary of you. They're like, is it going to be a pain? Is it going to be difficult? And you also have to start banking some favors and getting some
Oh, that
credibility,
yeah.
especially in security, because it's something that is so driven by,
When when
influence and not authority.
when all of us were younger, and wow, I'm dating ourselves, right? But when we were younger and we got into the field, we all started out more on. I think we did. Like we started more on the system side, and then we kind of went to the network side, and then we went to maybe the cybersecurity side, and it was kind of like a rite of passage. But now people are graduating and like, I want to go right into cybersecurity, but that's not how it was, I think, for us. And it's a very different world. And going back to about getting rid of help desk, this is why we have things like agentic AI and other types of AI software, right? Now this AI software is actually doing a lot of those tasks because the LLMs understand what to do. As long as, but then that becomes another vulnerability. Is my, you
It's
know,
all,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so agentic AI, I'm glad we're talking about this because I think it is fascinating, both from a development perspective and a consumer perspective. It's really, really beneficial for very specific tasks right now, what I would say, right? Like it needs a very specific purpose, but if you hone it and do your prompt right, it will do its job wonderfully. But You're absolutely right. API sprawl is a real thing. And that is the thing. If you were to ask me one thing that keeps me up at night, it's API sprawl. That and like credential leaks and secrets everywhere, that kind of stuff keeps me up at night. And agentic AI is only increasing that.
Oh, totally. And I was actually thinking of that when you were talking about help desk and all. It seems like help desk, anything user or customer facing, is basically going to AI. I mean, even a lot of the services that I use, I know they're not big companies, they're startups and everything,
Yeah.
but you got to go through at least one or two chatbots before you can even get their email address to
Yes.
ask them something.
But
And
like
I
your
see that
Amazon,
only increasing.
your
Yeah.
eBay, right? Amazon and eBay. Can you just give me a person? How can I help you?
Yes,
I
I'm
don't want
here
to
for you.
speak to somebody, but what is your problem? I want to speak to somebody. Please tell me the topic first so we can get you the right person. Shut up.
Yeah. Well, this is a lot of fascinating stuff. I mean, I'm sure it could keep going on, but I guess it is a bit cliche. It's the people who are difficult. The machines are, you know, they can be complicated and temperamental, but when you bring in the human factor, wow, that's
Yeah.
when things get dicey.
It keeps it interesting for sure. And I do hope that, we continue to integrate it into what we do in technology, really understanding the people that are using technology so we can build better technology for people.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite quotes that I've used in security for years is, Yogi Berra supposedly said that 90% of the game is half mental. You'd be
Mm,
surprised how much security is really a lot of psychology, both the
yeah.
organizational side and also the social engineering, tricking people and usability. It's a huge field that probably doesn't get enough attention. So, Nikki, you rack up a couple more PhDs or
I was just gonna,
doctorates, and
yeah.
you'll have this covered. So it should be cool.
I was gonna say maybe if I go for a PhD after my DSc, I'll talk about how to socially uh, control people on the threat side who are nation state actors that eat chocolate. I mean, something crazy, right?
Yeah, you could do it. Hey, the I would bet that the pool of research is wide open for that. I'd bet you'd have a nice open lane for that in
There you go.
research.
All right.
Well, that's always the issue, right? Like they tell you don't research the whole entire world, right? You need something specific. It
You
has to
have
be
to be
honed.
focused.
Yeah.
Yes, you have to be focused. But I also think that a lot of the work that I did in the DSc and PhD, as far as scope and purpose, like why you're doing what you're doing, but also scope, is super helpful because, especially when you're trying to remediate a vulnerability or fix one thing, it's like, okay, let me just try to focus on this one thing right now and get this thing done, and then we can move on to the next thing. So sometimes scope is helpful.
And when I'm doing my dissertation is focusing on cyber warfare and ethical cyber warfare, and that's funny, right? Because people like they don't go together. I'm like, but they kind of do. And that's the same thing with vulnerabilities and everything else in the human factor. How far is somebody willing to go? So that makes me think about what you're saying about the social factor part of it. You know, people's perceptions in different cultures are very different. And that's no different from people within IT themselves. The IT person has one focus and it's usually generalized. It's bias, right? Oh, I'm a developer. These security people are not here to help me. And then the help desk might say, oh, these developers don't understand what we have to go through every single day to fix their issues. So there's a lot of psychology and sociology involved in all these different aspects of our um, IT overall community, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. The first book I wrote, Mind the Tech Gap, was very specifically focused on the sometimes combative nature between IT and security teams and sort of where that comes from. So I sort of like laid the groundwork for where I think that a lot of these issues kind of came from. Some of it's perception, some of it's, I think, differing education paths, right? Like security teams are focused on security. Yes, we care that the systems are functioning, right? The CIA triad, availability, is part of what we care about. But we also want to make sure those systems are secure and available. Versus IT and development, they may have project deadlines. They're worried about maybe a customer or an executive level, sort of directive and trying to make things happen. So, sometimes security comes secondary, and not just because, maybe it's not even because they don't care. They just may say, oh, I've got this deadline. I'm going to implement the basic controls I need to, and then I got to go. I got to do other stuff.
I would argue that a lot of the issues with human factors in all these different departments is really about team building. And what I mean by that is, one of the things I always focus on is from like the forming, like storming, norming, performing. If organizations understand each other's roles a lot better, then they understand why. But if they don't have an idea, this goes back to the beginning of our podcast, right? When if you don't understand why somebody's doing what they're doing, then you might have this, I don't know, like this disdain or this fear or whatever it is. But if you get all these departments into one room and everyone does a little bit of a presentation and says, this is why we do it. Even the security people like us, we're biased, right? Like these help desk people, they don't get it. But sometimes we don't know what they went through that day. And if we understood what they go through sometimes, because even though we might have been there, we forget, right? Everyone forgets where they've been sometimes, some more than others. But, we really need to have an understanding of what we do in order to help each other.
You're going to end us on a big kumbaya. That's fantastic.
Love it.
Well
you
done.
want me to start
You're getting
singing?
good at this. Oh, please. No, don't sing because you're going to get us a copyright strike. So
Okay, sorry.
no singing. Okay. Oh, that's great. Well, Nikki, thanks so much for joining us. This is some interesting stuff, and these are some of the toughest problems in security and technology. Is how to deal with all this. You have taken on quite a task.
Yeah, thank you. No, thank you both for having me. This was such a great conversation, and happy that I got a chance to chat with you all about human factors and security and just some complicated problems.
Great. And we learned how to make a tequila sunrise correctly. So,
there you go.
All right.
I'm gonna have to go get my book signed now.
There you go.
That's right.
That's
okay.
right.
I'll have to read your books. There's what you mentioned. One. There's another one too.
There's two.
Right?
Yeah. So there's Mind the Tech
Okay.
Gap. There's Effective Vulnerability Management, and I am writing a third book that is specific human factors in cybersecurity.
Okay. Everyone, run out and buy those books and like and subscribe and tell your friends about the show.
And we'll put the book links in the comments.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Nikki.
Thank you all.
Adam,
Thank you.
see you next time.
See you next time.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.